Hello and good evening and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel Club, the Comics Masterpiece Edition. And you know, if there's a book that fits the Comics Masterpiece, theme and brand, it's Marvel's. This is such an iconic book. It is such an amazing book. I'm really, really lucky that we're featuring it this month for the club, and that we're really honored to have Kurt Busiek here. And I want to welcome you, Kurt. And I want to say hi to you and thank you for doing this, and thank you for writing this book, and thank you for writing all the things you wrote. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we always have writers and artists who watch this series because they want to make comics themselves. I mean, that's a thing they want to do. If there was kind of a single piece of advice that you would give someone who wants to have a career in comics, whether it's mechanical, whether it's philosophical, what might that be, Kurt?
I have two basic pieces of advice that I like to give people. They're both, one of them is sort of educational and the other one is pragmatic. The educational one is finish things.
Yeah.
That literally, there's lots of books out there you can read about making comics. There weren't when I was a kid. There are now, but it doesn't matter because nothing will teach you how to make comics better than making comics. Much as I'd say, go out and buy Al Scott's books, please go out and buy Al Scott's books.
Yeah.
Make comics and finish them. If you spend all your time starting stories that you don't finish, when you finally get around to finishing stuff, you won't know how to do it. Scott and I did 60 pages of the Battle of Lexington, and it was not a very good story, but we finished it, we ended it, and we got practice doing an ending. And we did other stuff together that has never seen print, that had endings. And as a result, when it came time to sell my first material, and Scott's selling his first material, we knew how to tell a story, and that includes endings. So practice, try things out, experiment. It doesn't have to be good. It just has to be done. Because if you do something and it's no good, well, you learned, don't do that again. But if you're paralyzed because you can't, you can't bring yourself to finish it, then you'll never know whether it was a good thing, or a bad thing. And you'll learn from the bad things as well as the good things. The pragmatic thing is, this has changed a lot as the internet revolution has altered our world, and you can make comics and you can put them on the internet and you can gather a readership without any publisher ever being involved except yourself. But if you're trying to break in at Marvel or DC or Dark Horse or IDW or anywhere, the thing you need to remember is that you are trying to supply the needs of the person on the other side of the desk. That they have a job to do, and that job is publishing comics, but it's not necessarily publishing your comics. Yeah. It's publishing the comics their boss wants them to publish. It's publishing the comics they think can sell. When I broke in at Marvel, if you asked me, what comic would you like to write more than any other, I would have said X-Men. But I knew I wasn't going to be able to write X-Men because Chris Claremont had been writing it forever, and he kept writing it forever ever since. By the time we got to a point where maybe I could have written X-Men, I didn't so much want to write X-Men anymore. But I wrote a review for the fan press of Power Man and Iron Fist, where the last paragraph was literally, someday Joe Duffy is going to read this book, and I pity the guy who has to do the book after her. I certainly would have no idea what to do with it. And after I sold a script or two backup stories to DC Comics, I noticed that Power Man and Iron Fist was month after month fill-ins written by the editor. Maybe he needed some help. So I came up with a Power Man and Iron Fist story, and I wrote up a synopsis of it, and I sent it to him. with a note saying I'd already been writing professionally for DC. I didn't mention I'd been writing 7 pages professionally for DC, just that I'd already been writing for DC. And he gave me a chance, and I ended up writing that book for 12 issues. It was not a book I wanted to write. It was not a book I knew how to write. It was a book I wanted to read, and I wanted to read it as written by Joe Duffy. Yeah. So I tried to write it as if I was Joe Duffy, which meant it didn't work out so well. And it turned out that the editor didn't like what Joe was doing anyway. So he wasn't happy with it either. But he needed somebody to fill those pages every month. And I needed an opportunity. So look for, where are new people breaking in? Where are those new names coming from? What are they doing? That you know, when Len Wein and Marv Wolfman broke in, the place you broke in was doing things like 8-page stories in House of Mystery. So they did those because that was where the opportunity was. When Marvel did a lot of fill-ins, there was an opportunity there for fill-ins. We don't do fill-ins so much anymore because you got to put them in previews 3 months ahead of time. So it's always changing, but there are always new people showing up. So look at where they're showing up and see if you can figure out, this publisher, this editor needs things. I will give him things that I would like to write that are the kind of things he needs. Because you're not going to be able to convince him to do something he doesn't want to do, or her, or them, or whatever. Because you're nobody. You know, it's the same advice I gave Alex: is you're not going to get them to revive Marvel fans, but more expensive. Just want to do it. But what can you sell them? You can sell them maybe this, which is the sort of thing maybe they do want.
Yeah.
So that is, you know, that's half the job starting out. It's all true that every freelancer is a small businessman. You and I have been talking about business stuff for much of this conversation, and I don't want to sound too calculating. I'm certainly, you know, I focus a lot on the art side of, you know, the dream story as I want to do. But
absolutely.
But if you are an artist, if you are a writer, if you know, even if you are a cartoonist who's putting work out on the internet for free, you are in charge of your career. Nobody else is. You know, there's a lot of people who broke in at Marvel, worked at Marvel for 10 years, and then didn't know what to do because Marvel dropped them.
Yeah.
And they'd never figured out, how do I find my next job? Because they didn't have to. As long as they were useful to Marvel or useful to DC, the work kept coming in.
Yep.
I was very lucky to an extent in that I sold something to DC, and then the next thing I sold to DC, the editor who bought it showed it to other editors, and they said, "Wow, what a piece of crap!" And I didn't get work from DC for another couple of years. And I broke in at Marvel doing Power Man and Iron Fist, and a year later, I was out of that job too. So I learned really early that the company does not have your best interests at heart. The company has their best interests at heart. So the person who's going to be in charge of my best interests is me. And if you're a freelancer, it's you.
Yes.
So keep that in mind. But all that is secondary to finish things, practice.